All right. First item is consideration of the agenda. Any comments or conflict of interest from commission members? Hearing none. Consideration, conflicts. Next is approval of minutes from May 19. We have the draft minutes in the packet. I note one speaker, Janet Killian. We did not get her name recorded.
In the
I
minutes.
believe Ms. Killian is with us again this evening.
Did you approve the agenda? Did I just miss that?
We did,
Okay. With a vote?
not with a vote.
No, just by consensus?
Consensus.
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry, I won't move so fast.
In the May 19th draft minutes, public comment, oh, right there with the question mark. Perfect. We'll get that added.
Any other comments, additions, corrections? I did not see any. Can we have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Approved. Okay. Next item is public comment on the agenda.
Yeah, there's kind of some quote,
We
there's
still
some,
haven't changed this.
yeah. So
Have
it
to do
is
that.
on agenda items other than public hearing. We don't have a public hearing, so just public comment on agenda items.
Public comment on agenda items. Any?
Yes. We have Janet Killian.
Some of the objectives listed in or stated in the zoning ordinance are to minimize erosion, stabilize the shoreline, and protect property values. The restrictions in the shoreline protection strip section of the zoning ordinance do not adequately support these objectives. Parcels with steep banks are subject to erosion. Plants and ground cover are not adequate erosion controls on these steep banks. The plants wash down the banks and do not hold the soil. The property owners with these steep banks should be allowed to have more substantial erosion controls than what's currently allowed in the zoning ordinance. You need to change the zoning ordinance to allow for exceptions to the shoreline protection strip. There can be washouts when the elevation changes 6 feet in a distance of 30 feet. So when you have a steep bank that increases in elevation from the lake 12 feet or more in a distance of 15 to 20 feet or less, that's definitely too steep to hold these plants. I see no reason to delay consideration of this change. The Planning Commission has already revised the entire zoning ordinance before reviewing the master plan, and you're now ready to adopt your First Amendment on short-term rentals. I suggest you consider amending the ordinance for both of these items, the change in, or the allowing for the exceptions to the shoreline protection strip and the short-term rentals at the same time, and do it as one public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric Douglas.
Good evening, Eric Douglas, 1223 Barnes Park Road. Just bringing some statistics I came across is, the Nakawima Trailway has been a big topic lately. But the National Rec and Park Association, they do an agency performance review every year. I just pulled numbers for populations less than 20,000 people because that's the lowest they go. But carrying on, residents per park, it averages about 1,001 people per park. 12.9 acres of park per 1,000 residents. They offer 45 programs. 83% of programs are fee-based. Operating expenditures per capita coming in at about $140. Operations and maintenance are about 46% of cost. And revenue per capita is about $49 or 31.1%. Bringing this up because of the Tar Trails acquisition of the property in Eastport, which they have maintenance set-asides and a good volunteer base. They could easily cut the operation and maintenance costs down, create higher revenue per capita if we could get some programs going that we could charge fees for. There's a very strong and very motivated group of people that are willing to volunteer and willing to step up and do the things that have to be done. And TAR's doing a meeting about the Torch to Bay segment, I think on the 27th of June. Followed up with, per Bob's request at the last board meeting, wanted someone to get in touch and have a representative here after the 27th meeting, so the July board meeting, just to kind of get a timing and something on the agenda to make it official. To add to that, I just read in there about, it's in the Bader survey there about the trailhead and the trail system there. So, it's obviously an important thing, and we're pretty excited to work with TART to come up with different venues and different options for the trailhead, as well as, kind of doing some restoration there and cleaning the place up and making it look good. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Amy Rosebarn.
Hi there. Am I supposed to give my address?
Yes, please, sorry.
Okay, I've not done this before. 5333 Farrell Road in Central Lake, Township. I'm not as prepared as Eric. I looked all his statistics, but I do have a lot of enthusiasm. I moved here with my husband in 2020, and we just love Eastport. There's so many resources here. It's so beautiful. We have so many parks and beaches and stuff, and I'm not one of those people that likes them all hidden away and private. I see people driving through here at 60 miles an hour and people don't stop. They just keep driving, and I would love to be part of a more integrated recreational experience that, I love the trails that go up to the bridge, to Melanson, and I just would love it if our community could be part of that. I also would love to have a weekend, with base and all those areas, and I'm all in. So I think it would be worth that. I know I have talked to some people who are I think there's some people in the community that's a downside for, and I think, like Eric mentioned, there's ways to work with people and make it, it doesn't have to be some monolithic thing that's decided. I think there's a way to make it work for everybody in the community. But I think it would be a really good thing for all of us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cassie Wiggins?
Good evening. I'm Casey Wiggins. I'm at 131 Northwest Torch Lake Drive in Keewaydon. And I'd like to comment about the activity that is about to be undertaken concerning the master plan. You spent a lot of time in the last 24 months to work on updating the zoning ordinance. And the master plan is next in sight. I think that's an important thing to look at. I have some concerns about the direction that's being taken on the master plan process. It reflects some of what happened on the zoning ordinance. And it really boils down to the fact that I think we're starting about the process in a backwards direction. We're not leading it, we're letting it lead us. I've extracted some comments from other master plan documents from other townships in the area, and one that I really liked was the quote that said, "A fundamental purpose of a master plan is to enable a community to establish a direction for physical development capital investment, and growth. Therefore, a master plan represents a foundation policy statement about what a community is, what its residents value, and what those residents and businesses hope the community will become. As I review the documents that were presented at the last planning meeting, the draft documents, which involved demographics and housing economic development, and subsequently in today's agenda, proposed chapters and the boilerplate documents that were presented for your consideration moving forward, I found them to be lacking relative to the statement that I just read. In fact, I found them to be sterile. They really did not encompass anything that talked about the vision that you have or that we have for Torch Lake Township. What's our vision? What's the mission? What's our charter? What makes us unique? What reputation do we want people to have? What do we want to be known for? There isn't anything in these documents that I've seen. It looks like boilerplate that came out of some book. Added some data about that. There's a road that goes through here. There's a couple of villages that live here. There are 1,149 people that live here. But it doesn't really reflect the fact that we are a unique township. Most of our residents don't live here all the time at all, and they aren't accounted for in any of those documents. So I guess what I'd like to raise, I'd like to encourage you to do is to, as you create a plan is an outline of a strategy for achievement of an objective, is you have a clear understanding of what the goals of that plan should be. What are the objectives that you want to accomplish? What services are available? What services are provided? What are required? Which ones are needed? And I don't see any of that in the documents that I read for the last two meetings. What does the township do? What are you supposed to do? What value is provided? So the reason for my comment here is to encourage you to take a step back, consider what it is that we're trying to accomplish. What do we want to be? What do we want the world to know us to be? And again, I took a couple of comments from other townships. Garfield Township, the Charter Township. It's a part of the northwest region of the Lower Peninsula of northern Michigan, a scenic area known for drawing visitors throughout all four seasons to enjoy beaches, vineyards, outdoor recreation, natural resources, and culinary destinations. I would implore you to create a similar kind of a statement. Similarly, the Charter Township of Long Lake has a mission statement. It's longer, I'm not going to read it. But there are plenty of examples of the Michigan Township, I think it's Alliance, represents all the townships in Michigan. There's a lot of good information, a lot of good examples of things that other people have done that I think that we could take advantage of as you go forward and consider your planning activity. And I thank you for that.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Casey.
Any other comments? Nope. I think we covered everyone in the audience, so we can consider comments taken. Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. No other is there any other correspondence?
Nothing additional.
No correspondence. Move on to unfinished business. And I believe the zoning amendment regarding the short-term rental definition is back up. And we have-
Yeah, so last month you talked a little bit about this definition and trying to clear it up and change it from the, what was in the previous ordinance. And so I've proposed some language here, and I also provided examples of other communities' language. I kind of liked, you can see I started with the city of Traverse City as the basis for this, but then added in the subletting. I've not seen an ordinance that has a definition related to subletting in short-term rentals. I don't know if that's going to stand up when challenged. So it's something that every community deals with and is trying to find a way to deal with in general. Hoping this might catch it. I don't know, we'll have to wait and see, I guess, is kind of my my answer to that. But like I said, to try to catch that we're all struggling with. So,
What
Open-
exactly does sublet mean?
like, one person holds the actual lease for 30 days and then they lease it back out for 1 week at a time.
Got it.
So I could, if you wanted me to, I could define that. Otherwise, if it's not defined, you go to the dictionary and what the dictionary says that word means.
I was also interested in the East Bay Township example, use or used for accommodations or lodging.
Yeah. So I tried to cover that with rented, intended to be rented. Because I started with East Bays, but then there was some of the cities that I like, when I was going back and forth on it. So whatever you kind of like. But I think that the intent of that is good, like is used or intended to be used, because you end up with people that are saying, well, I'm not actually doing it. You have it listed, but I'm not actually doing anything wrong. You're intending to,
Nobody
right?
rented it.
Right. So, and honestly, Torch Lake, out of a lot of the local townships, you don't struggle with it as much as other townships do. I think it's just the nature of kind of the dynamics of the community in that there are people that are violating that are doing short-term rentals, right? But there are a lot of other communities that are just struggling very much with enforcement on it, in that it's kind of out of control with people renting them and issues and people complaining. We every so often will get a call about a short-term rental. I did get some just last week from Jackie, because in Milton, they changed their monitoring software. And so there were a couple that showed up as being in Milton that are actually in Torch that hadn't been found before. But we also found in that program that there's some old listings that are showing up. So people that it's saying are renting, and then doing enforcement for those and finding out that they actually are not. So I don't know if there's an old website that's kind of hanging out there. So I haven't looked into those new ones yet. I think there's about 3 of them that she sent over to me for that. But all of that to say, here's a proposed definition. Let me know your comments.
I have one other question. It was interesting. It's also for Elmwood Township, where they make the distinction of the owner not being residing in it when they're renting it. What does that have to do with it?
They were very specific because there's some people that, well, it has to do with their definition for bed and breakfast, their real definition for bed and breakfast. And then some people have kind of like not full units, that they also like live in the house, and then they have like a room locked off with a separate entrance. And so if that was falling into the definition of a short-term rental, or if it was falling into the bed and breakfast.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't mention it, because I wouldn't have wanted that, because that makes it even more, it makes it potentially more easy to game the system if you're there
Right.
somehow, or some kind of boxed in unit. So,
Right, renting a room out sort of invites you to do that, right? Yeah, I suppose so too.
Yeah, I like them a little broader if possible, just so that it catches. If it gets too refined, like you said, one thing can be off and you go, I don't meet the
Right,
definition.
Unintended.
Yeah.
I had a question about the idea of other compensation. Under your other examples, is there a second one down?
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that a little bit?
I mean, I think they put it in there because it could be, instead of paying a fee, I'm trading you a stay at my house for your house, or I've had people not in short-term rentals, but in other uses that donate to your favorite charity, and I won't charge you to stay in my place. So I'm not really renting it because you're not paying me for that. And we could add something like that in there. I didn't think that it was necessary because of adding the intended to be rented portion of it for the compensation part. But in full disclosure, too, like Elmwood and East Bay both have the same attorney. So that's why theirs both say the paying a fee or other compensation. in there, and there may be some other that's similar between those two.
Again, I don't feel like we have a tremendous amount of problems with it. Not like we're trying to out-trick the,
I think her definition makes sense. I had one other question on it. A while back, maybe it was about a year ago, the planning commission approved a special use permit for a home in the Torch, Torch Business District up here, Village Business Area. And it wasn't a bed and breakfast. It wasn't a hotel or a motel, but it was approved for short-term rentals.
Right.
So it seems like we need something like this. Does not include approved bed and breakfast, hotels, motels, or, approved special use permits or something like that, because of that. Otherwise, that would conflict with the ordinance, wouldn't it?
Well, we do allow for the short-term rentals as a special use permit in the village district still. So this would not, basically, we're saying, yes, you meet the definition and you were approved properly under that definition. So they're covered there, so it doesn't conflict.
this isn't a restriction, this is just a definition.
Right,
It's just-
right. So it's not regulating in that
use,
way. So it would be okay. We would not have an issue.
I like it.
Thoughts, Lori? Okay. Do you want to make any changes? Denise?
I think it's fine. The suggestion.
Okay, sounds like we're all comfortable. Should we move to having the hearing?
Sarah's got a proposed recommended motion here. I'll go ahead and make it. I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing on the definition of short-term rentals.
I'll second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. We will schedule that for our next regular meeting.
Correct.
Before we move off the topic, 2 items. The short-term rental pressure is only going to increase. So a couple of comments came up in I think it was the last planning commission meeting, or it might have been a board meeting, but just concerns over both monitoring and enforcement. You made a comment about, must have been Milton's Township has a program they monitor. What do we do to monitor, to check it? How do we go about knowing if it's happening, other than people calling in?
People call in, and then when Jackie was here, she would go and search the internet and the website listings every so often to see if there was anything listed there. I'm not as proactive as that to look for them, but I can be if the township board or Bob wants me to look for that. I mean, the easiest way is the monitoring system. I mean, honestly, I guess I don't know how much they're going for right now, but for $1,000 a year or $1,500, they line them up, they give you the proof. It's all backed up. You can put the letters that you send out, and it provides a nice documentation for the courts to have that. I do understand that is money that the township would have to pay, since we don't, like in Milton and Elk Rapids and East Bay and Elmwood, they all collect licensing fees because they have multiple rentals there, and they do a licensing procedure that we don't. So they cover that cost in the fees for the licenses. Where since we don't do that, and we only have a handful that are approved through a special use permit, we don't have that kind of group to pass that fee on to. So that would be something the township board would have to decide. But some of the problems with the enforcement side of it is when you're looking on, I'm going to pick on Airbnb just because that's what everybody's familiar with, but it's any website when you're doing that. You have to have somebody be able to identify the house. And so people get kind of crafty about which parts of the house they show, if they show the outside or not, if they show the address, where it's actually located at. That's something that the programming does. They look through it's on the main highway. They'll look through Google Street View, but they use Realtor.com. They use Zillow to compare inside photos of what people have taken for their listing versus what they've seen in the past. And they on the back end on mine, you can click on it and it says, yeah, we verified 3 different ways that this is this actual house, so that somebody can't say, no, that's not mine, because we can't go legally and go into somebody's house without somebody saying that we can be there. But these pictures on the internet, they have programs that run all of this and look, and we just take hours and hours of our time to go through that. But then also when you're trying to preserve the documentation from Airbnb, when you go to print it, it doesn't print as a nice sheet that you can read and present. It's got a picture here and it's got this. And so it's not this nice little package where on their side, they have it all linked and it's every listing they've ever had. Even when it disappears, it's still there. So you can track it back and it's all nicely organized together. So from an enforcement perspective, it makes it the record a lot nicer when you're presenting it to essentially a judge eventually, should you need to.
So we've had this ordinance in place for a number of years.
Yes.
This isn't new.
Right, to allow them as a special use permit in the village district. That is, we've had that for at least since 19, I think, was when that amendment, and it could have even been prior to that. At least that's when the definition changed or was added. I don't know if it was regulated prior to. And we do it a lot differently than other communities because we go through a special use process versus a lot of communities do the license. So it doesn't have any of the non-conforming grandfathering component of zoning because you have a license and that's under a police power ordinance. So they're just treated differently based on how you enforce them and which ordinance they're in.
But you said the monitoring was about $1,500 a year?
And
Give or take.
I mean,
And it's
I
a
hate to say
program, you
that-
pay for it, you get a license for it, and you run it, and it gets your report?
yeah, I mean, they do it all and then it's in real time, so as new ones come on board, they're always identifying them and different components related to it. I haven't seen numbers recently, but I mean, to me, when you're looking at it from, a township and the monies the townships collect is very minimal compared to other things that we do and spend money on as a township. I haven't seen it as recent for numbers, and Milton did just change companies. I know East Bay uses somebody else, and Elk Rapids uses, Granicus used to be Host Compliance. That was kind of the first one that when you heard people like, oh, we're using Host Compliance, which is kind of an older version. It's not as user-friendly as some of the other ones. But I don't know I could get numbers for the board.
It would be something that you could get numbers to bring it back to this group, and then we make a recommendation to the board.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think given that we're about to kick off, I think here in a few minutes, the survey process, and a couple of our questions at least relate to this issue. It'd be interesting to see that feedback before we jump too far into over monitoring or spending money that isn't necessary. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I'll add that to the list here and, get something back to you.
Okay. Was that all, Andy? You said a couple of things. Okay. Next up is bylaw review.
So this has all the edits in it since you've started editing it. I should have highlighted the ones that I did change, but your comments from last month were related to a couple of items. So one is about the township board representative and serving as chair and vice chair. So I made an edit on page 3 of 9, item E, that says that the township board representative shall not serve as the chairperson, but can be the vice chair. I changed item H on that same page to take away the automatic succession of filling a term. That's not required under the law that you have that language. You can fill a term however you're comfortable with. So similar to how appointments are made, if there's a vacancy, you hold an election and whoever wins your election would serve the remainder of the term. And then the other item was the agenda, and in red line, it's kind of difficult to see exactly how it all shook out, but I looked at our current agenda and made it line up with that, to do that. We could also, it does have the sentence at the beginning, shall include the following, but determined by the chair versus about the order and that. So a little bit of flexibility. You're not required to, in your bylaws, have what's, this agenda component in here. So if you wanted to take it all out, you could, but it does align with your current agenda. I think those were the only,
I think we talked about the other,
yeah.
there was something toward the end about the.
Oh, yeah, the incompatibility of offices.
Yes.
One was duplicate, and then the second one I just took out. I mean, if state law says we can do something, I don't know why we
We
need to
don't need to
repeat it.
restate state law, right?
And I guess I've never heard that either. So I think I almost went down a rabbit hole of what state statute are we talking about and how does that work? But didn't. That's an attorney question, honestly, if whatever should apply or not. So I just took it out.
Comments, questions? I think we discussed some of this last time, and we just needed to make some corrections about the membership primarily, so. Discussion, anyone?
It addressed everything I had.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Can we have a motion to accept the bylaws as presented?
I'll make the motion to accept the bylaws as
Right.
presented.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Consider them adopted. Moving on to the master plan.
Sure. So I put in here kind of the outline. You guys had talked about this at last month's meeting with Jen about chapters and other chapters that would be included in the master plan. And I have the park and rec plan here. And then also some of the community engagement that was basically that the board approved for your process. So that's just included in here. I didn't make any changes from the proposal that went for the board in the budgeting process for that. There are 2 chapters in your packet, but I would like to go out of order and deal with the survey first and then come back up to the chapters.
Yeah, I thought maybe we could just take a pause because we haven't had a regular meeting, I guess, in a little while, just to remind us and our audience about the process here with the master plan.
Sure.
That we are reviewing, we've agreed that we're going to review a couple of chapters per meeting, which is, I think, as we heard in public comment, really is boilerplate, but we
Right.
need that information in there to form the basis.
Right. Yeah. And so I guess related to that comment, these are their background chapters. They're kind of setting the stage for you. And then looking at the survey and the open house, that's when you're get into kind of these policy items, what's your vision, what's your mission. And so we haven't done any of that work because we haven't talked to the public yet.
Right.
And so,
Right.
so we want to do that in the survey. We're going to start with the survey to go out. That's going to be online. It'll also be available hard copy. Somebody can pick up to do, go through that process, get some idea of what's happening based on whatever comes out of the survey that can help us with the open house questions as well. So the open house is going to work on some of those questions that are just really difficult to put in a survey, that you kind of need to either have a conversation with somebody or explain in more depth, or have a map to use that's just hard to put into the survey format. But also we can look at some of the responses that we're getting out of the survey and we can say, okay, we need to dig deeper into this one topic using the open house to do that. Or we can say, we really missed on this question. We need to ask it in a different way, because that happens as well, depending on the communities. So that's kind of another opportunity. So somebody that participates in both the survey and the open house is gonna, they're not gonna be bored because it's not all the same over again. But at the same time, if they only participate at one or the other, they're not missing everything either for their input. And so trying to use the survey, that's gonna go to all of the property owners. So that will hit everybody that's currently here or in Florida or wherever they're at, even though it's going out in the summer. to get the input. And then the open house you guys talked about doing in September, and just kind of looking at that's after the busy summer season, but still early enough for snowbirds if they're around to be able to participate. Like I said, that's one opportunity. We also have all these public meetings that you can come to provide comment. There will be a public hearing once we get through the process. There's a 63-day public review period as required by law for the public to take a look at it online to provide input. So there's multiple opportunities as well to provide input based on once the planning commission kind of gets into it and gets into, I'm going to call it the fun part. This part's kind of boring. You're talking about how many people live here. I mean, it's data. If you look, I like data, but at the same at the same time, you're not really talking about some of those items. I know Andy, you mentioned, the airport. Like, when are we going to talk about that? Well, that's still to come. There's brief mention passing of it, but what's going to happen there, or how we're going to treat it and deal with it, that's part of the community engagement. That's part of the policies, and you'll see that come out later on.
And
in
you're
your
definitely
vision.
going to want that changed to a paved runway now. I think,
Yes,
so.
yes, that's true. So, so we're kind of working through that background right now. There are some kind of takeaways and maybe some recommendations based on what we've seen. And those are typically a little bit more broad and from like a planning perspective, professional planning perspective. But it definitely, once we get through the community engagement and you're reading it as a whole, as a document, and you get your vision, those are all be tailored and more refined.
And I think we talked about that at the last meeting. We appreciate those, but we're not necessarily adopting them. We're
Exactly.
Food for thought.
Yeah, this is your first round draft. You're going to tell me about big policy items that either you like or you don't like, or what do you have questions about? And then you'll review it again as a big final draft, a whole document, to make sure it all makes sense and is cohesive. And then once you review that whole draft, just to go through the whole process, you'll review a whole draft, and then you'll make a recommendation to the township board to authorize it for distribution. The township board will review that whole draft, and then they will make a motion basically to send it out for public review. So that's that 63-day, that starts the 63-day review process. All of your neighboring jurisdictions and county get a notice of that. And then 63 days. At the end of 63 days, it comes back to the planning commission, and you will hold your public hearing on the document, where you'll consider anything you got during that 63 days, anything new that comes in, and then you'll make a decision about moving forward with the adoption of it or not, based on what you hear, if you need to make changes. So this really is a planning commission document. Once you make a recommendation to adopt it, the township board can adopt it or not adopt it, but they can't change it. It has to come back to the planning commission to change it, which is kind of unique, because a lot of things the township board has the power to be able to make changes to it without coming back to the planning commission. But unless it's like a typo or maybe a picture or something like that, if it's policy or an action item, the planning commission is the one that needs to make that recommendation and have that discussion.
Good. Thank you very much. That was helpful to remind us where we are. So should we move to the survey first? And
I'd like to, so we can get that out. And
Okay.
if you get tired before you get on to the next part.
do you have anything to start off with, or?
I did not, so I sent out a link to this Survey Monkey for you to be able to use in real time. Denise, you provided one of the comments.
Yeah, and I have a lot of distractions in my life, but I got distracted after that, but it was question 22 or something. Yeah, and it wouldn't let you check more than one.
Right, and so, yep.
You know.
So we'll get that fixed, and that's one of those things. That's why I'm sending it out to you to help me kind of spot check some of those. Click on it, try to make it do something wrong or right, or struggle with it, because we're sending it out to everybody. So
So I think, we could continue to hone this down forever, right?
right.
I don't think it should be any longer.
Mhm.
I like the tone of it personally. I feel like we've hit the topics that we're interested in and we think the community is interested in. hopefully they hang on to the end.
Right.
I did not admittedly try the Survey Monkey.
And I would encourage you not to try to wordsmith it too much. If you see a question, you don't understand what it is meaning or what the intent is, we can have that discussion versus saying,
Question 27.
yes.
Well, if I were taking, I don't live in any one of these. I guess I do. Living currently would prefer, so I'm just going to select which one. I struggled with it. I didn't really understand what it was asking.
Right. Yeah, and that's so what we're trying to get at with this question is, what you're currently living in. And we could change, so the detached single-family home, we could call that's kind of planner language for every, like, normal home, right? That most people live in. And what you currently live in, but then what you prefer to live in or live in the next 10 years. So what we find is that people currently live in single-family homes because that's what's available, not what they actually want to live in. And so that's why we ask, what would you prefer to live in if it were available? And then also because we're in an aging community, a lot of times in 10 to 20 years, you have a different spot in your life once you become an empty nester or retirement, or that you want to live in something different than what you currently are living in.
Does it kind of narrow it down a little bit too much? Like if I might not have a need in 10 years for some of these for myself because I won't be that old yet, but my parents might be. And so for them, I think it would be important to have it in the community. So maybe not me, but would I like to see these available as a housing option?
Maybe we do a different question related to that. I have done that where it's like, one of the questions we're going to talk about in the open house has to do with housing choices. And it says, I want to live I would want in my neighborhood, I would want my community, I don't want it all.
Yeah.
Type of
Yeah.
thing. So originally we had that in the survey, but then that's about 10 questions more to add.
Yeah.
So maybe I can add in just another row in here that talks about I'd like to see in our community or something like
Yeah.
that.
Or maybe the 10-year question could be, I'd like to see available in 10 years
Yeah.
to live in.
Yep,
Not necessarily I would want to live in it, but I'd like to see it.
sure. Okay.
I was going to ask before, and I'm sorry, what is your projected timeline for opening the survey?
As soon as I can get it done, I'd like to get it done by the end of the month
Right. Okay.
to get it out and then have it open for probably 6 weeks or so. Most people take it as soon as they're notified. Very few take it anytime later, but have it open for a month, 6 weeks. And to be able to do that and prep for the open house, I need to get it closed by about mid.
Right. So we really need to focus on getting this done today.
Yeah.
How do you communicate it out? Is it just through if you've signed up for that communication?
So we'll do it that way. I'm going to talk with the supervisor about doing a postcard as well. Their postcards are fairly inexpensive way to communicate, and we get really good response rate with it, honestly, versus not doing a postcard in communities that I've seen. Some communities have a really good social network and all of that, and it goes well, but really sending a postcard to each house, it helps a lot to get
Yeah.
responses.
And maybe it cannot be a really lame postcard. Maybe it can draw your attention.
We'll try our best. I have a graphic artist that we work with that's on the
Okay.
team, but maybe I'll send it to you to tell me if it's
Okay.
lame.
Lame.
Pretty picture of a lake. That always gets everyone's attention.
Yeah.
Something.
So, any other questions about the questions?
So going back to question number 27. So Sarah, what were you thinking you would do about that?
I'm going to change the last column, I think, to talk about what I'd like to see in my community versus what would I want to live in. Or something like, given the chance, I'd live in this type of housing, or I'll have to massage that and think about the consequences of adding that in there. It might end up being its own question.
Well, because when I read it, so it says, what type of unit do you currently live in, comma? What type would you prefer to live in now if the option were available in order to better meet your housing needs? And what type of unit would be, so it's like, it's 3 questions basically.
Mm-hmm.
So what if we broke it out maybe?
Yeah.
So that was the first comment, was just the wording of that. The second piece was, I don't know what an accessory dwelling unit is for sure, an ADU. I can guess.
Yeah. I can link some definitions
That would
or
be
some
great.
examples.
Maybe remove the detached, single family, just
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
everyone doesn't key on that immediately. I was just thinking as you were saying it, Andy, I wonder if we could, the second part of that question, if we could take some of the words out.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I really liked the survey. It was pretty easy to go through. And I like since the last time we saw the questions, the questions 29 through 32, I think are really good. I did have a couple questions on question number 30. It says there are currently 2 unincorporated villages within Torch Lake Township, which is obviously Eastport and the Torch Lake Village there. And it mentions that, see the map. I was wondering if maybe you could like circle them on the map, just because the colors, it's hard to tell. You could look it down, it looks like the same color down by the airport, actually. It's not, but it looks similar, and it's commercial.
Yeah. It's a good comment. Yeah.
And then how many characters do they have can they type into there?
I would have to double check. I can set the max. I think the standard is 200 and then the rest is as many as you want. So usually anything else that you'd like us to know, I have broader than some of the other ones. That's your catch-all question. I can double check them.
Also really like question number 29.
And we've included the recreational plan questions in here as well, which I think is great.
And we did chat with Tar about the question about the trailhead.
Oh, I was going to ask that. Are those kind of their suggestions or things to?
Yeah, where'd it go?
It's back.
Yeah, number 23. Yeah.
Because I note none of them address anything like programming or event space or.
Yeah. I think it's kind of hard. Jen and I talked about this question a lot because it's new, that property is new and it's owned by Tart, and what it'll look like in the future. And if we're I don't want the township to come out and say, we want this here in Targo. We don't do
Right,
that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then,
And they don't own any other property, do they?
right,
Yeah.
no. And then I don't like to ask questions that then people get disappointed with when we don't end up doing it or putting it in the plan later on, because that's just not feasible. But because this is so new and kind of in its infancy, it's harder to look at, what's the township's role going to be in the future and who's in the end going to be the owner of the property and all of that. And, it will take some time to get through that process. And this plan, the Park and Rec plan is good for 5 years. So in 5 years, we'll be able to, I think, have a better understanding of who the owner is, what the intention is there, how far the trails come, what we actually need there. And if any of this or all of this comes back, it doesn't limit the township or TART or anything from future grants just because we don't have it listed there as something we'd want there. The plan will be broad enough to say,
Could I give a little clarification to this? TART is the holder of the property.
Hmm.
It was purchased by residents for public use. And they are giving a loose 5 years for us to figure it out. They have no intention of owning the property, but they did a lot of work to enable it to happen. They're the holder of the property. So I did struggle with that one a little bit because I wish we could tease it out a little bit to get people thinking, this is ours. And it's for us to determine. But I think that can happen more when we meet, when we have our sessions, when we meet with people.
Why
So-
not make it more direct?
Yeah. I mean, there's no reason that we have to say TART recently acquired the 4 acres, like, we can leave it as there's, I mean, is it accurate to say that there's plans to provide a trailhead for the
Yeah.
trail there?
And that was the impetus for them to say,
Right.
oh, this is great, we'd like the trailhead, that'd be a great place for the trailhead. But I don't know.
I mean, we could
I would
say,
like that seed to start getting in our community's mind that,
What
This is-
question, what
this
question
is-
was it again?
pardon me?
23.
Thank you.
But I didn't really know how to articulate it, so I just let it go. But, yeah,
That's what I was thinking, something like community event space, or I don't know if that's really the right.
yeah. I mean,
I guess trailhead implies parking or some kind of,
yes,
I mean, I think the question could even say efforts have been made to establish a trailhead as part of the trailway and explain it a little bit and then say, what other amenities would you like to see included at this location? That doesn't, I mean, I know TART's been a part of it. It doesn't drag TART into it. It doesn't have people. It's just, I mean, that is, right? The effort is to create a trailhead there.
right.
Who's doing it isn't really,
Yeah.
hopefully super relevant. It's a trailhead. If I wanted to personally create a trailhead with my own money and do my own thing, then, you could go about that too. So, okay. Maybe I'll massage that language a little bit.
take out the reference to, some of the specifics, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah,
The point is, it's going to be a trailhead connected to,
right. Yeah. And we probably could link to information on the trail itself. I know TART has a nice webpage related to that. Because people may have never even heard of it, right? And have interest, and that would also help to spark a little bit of interest into it as well. Okay. Anything else with the survey? I am going to be updating the map. That's the first map in there because that's the road map. And so it's got volume numbers on it. But we're just going to have a regular, won't have the roads colored like that. It'll look a little different, but excuse me. It'll tell you what's around us and those items.
I did notice on that 24, I don't know if you can do anything about it, but I could say nowhere and anywhere.
Yeah. That question actually was different. I changed it, the responses, because it was tied to the zoning districts and people just don't function in zoning districts. Like even if you have a map, not everyone can read a map. And so to try to, so these are kind of my categories of items. So I'm open to suggestions too. But yeah, you could select anywhere and nowhere because it's select all that apply.
Yeah.
I could also add an other to that in case somebody doesn't really have the same grouping, it might make it a little more difficult, but this is like a better question for a map during an open house.
Yeah,
So it'll probably get carried over in some form to the open house.
yeah, I would probably answer that one myself with an other if I had a place to enter some words.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll make a couple more changes and we will work on getting this distributed and people to start taking it. If you see anything by the end of the week or something pops into your head, feel free to send me an email about it as well.
I think we adopted it in substantial form the last time around, so.
Yeah, I don't need a motion. I mean, if you want to, but I don't need any formal action as long as nobody's kicking and screaming. I'm good with.
Okay. Moving on, I think that takes us back to the chapters.
Yeah, so in your packet, you have economic development and transportation as two chapters for this month. And just like last month, don't worry about the formatting, some of those items, because we're going to be laying it out in a different way. I'm happy to take any kind of edits or typos or things outside of the meeting from you that you either language that maybe makes sense in a different way or anything like that. Kind of looking at broader, did we miss anything? Does something not make sense that we need to clarify it for you? I will tell you that the economic development chapter, it is difficult for a community like Torch Lake due to the size of it and the information that we have available from reliable sources to kind of paint a picture for you. So we talk about the drive time and items like that. The in-plan data, that's a great programming. A lot of people use it more for like market research, like I'm going to put a Walmart, what do I need here? But it's kind of fun to look at. In-plan though is done broader, right? So this is done on the zip codes, which that does include locations outside of the township. That's not limited to just the township's boundaries. So sometimes you'll see industries in here and you go, we don't have any of that in our township. Well, it might be in a different township with the same zip code for that. So to kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at that data. But like I said, it is a little bit more difficult because we're not a big commercial hub like the city of Traverse City when you're looking at their economic and different industries that are either missing or could be added to the community when you're looking at it. So
The in-plan data was fascinating.
yeah,
I hadn't seen
it's
that
fun.
before. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. Just as an aside. I will say this, and I don't know that I have a complete thesis here, but thinking about our earlier chapters, some of the socioeconomic information, and now we're talking about the employment. And in here, we seem to say, we don't have a lot of employers, a lot of people have to leave. We have a lot of retired people, but then we'd like to increase the number of people who telecommute. And in the earlier chapter, we say we have a lot of people living in a lower income bracket and transportation is hard. I feel like we're kind of going off in a couple of different directions. So I can give you more specifics. We don't need to go through them here.
Okay.
Just a thought. I'm not sure at all.
And I may have had a similar kind of reaction to it. Because part of it, because the data and all that is interesting, it seems well laid out and all of that. It feels though that there's hints on it. Maybe it wasn't as much this time around as it was the last time. There were hints of things that maybe we should consider. And it may be true that we should consider them, but we don't really know yet because we haven't really done the discovery process. So part of that was just kind of a bias of not necessarily jump into any conclusions until you actually do the survey and have the open house and stuff. That was one thought, but the other, probably the more concerning thing, I shouldn't say it, so it came out wrong. I wouldn't say it's a concern. It's more like, is this the structure typically of a master plan? Is that something that, is it Beckert and Rader came up with this, or is this something done by the MTA, or?
As far as the chapters that are included?
Yes.
The chapters that are included are ones that the Michigan Planning Enabling Act requires you to include certain information. Some of them are additional information that we find to be helpful in that. So in trying to generate a document that's long enough but not too long at the same time.
Well, because trying to avoid, and maybe the public commentary earlier today, I think, reminded me of it, or maybe, consider this, that we don't want to have happen with this master plan the same thing that happens with the existing master plan. You pick it up and you read, you get into 3 pages in and you're like, I'm done with this. And it's just too cumbersome. So one way to maybe address that might be, if it's okay, is we still go through and bring all the information together. But then later, when we're actually structuring it, you kind of lay out, here's the mission and vision for the community. Here's the real relevant data, almost like a glorified executive summary, but
Yeah.
more than just a 1 page. It's like maybe
Right.
3 or 4 pages. And then you take all this other stuff and put it back as exhibits or appendices. And
Yeah.
stuff. And then you just get through, here's the meat, here's the mission vision, here's the relevant data that's most important. Here's the actions we're going to take to deliver on that vision.
Yeah.
And then everything else supports it. And then I think people will.
Yeah, and so that's usually, I like to start the master plans with kind of a summary, but also your future land use and your action items, because that's what you're using, right? That's what you open the book to. So it drives some people crazy because it's not in order. Like if you have to read things in order for certain information, but having the meat at the beginning, like you mentioned it, for that, and then you have all this supporting documentation. So when you're making decisions, you can say, we want this, this, and this development. It's right here, but then if you need to, for whatever reasons, say, why did we do that? You can find it back in the back. I also do kind of a dashboard, like you're talking about, that has kind of fun graphics, and then you can say population is, or population has increased. And just kind of those bits that someone can pull out of all the information if they wanted to look at it in, maybe it's 4 pages, so you have 2 front and backs of just kind of quick, easy things to look at. And that might entice people to go and read a whole chapter about population if they see something there. But we call them dashboards, I guess, that kind of get put
Sort
on.
of the nature of, we get the thesis at the end, right?
Yeah.
And then we have to go back and build it into the whole outline of the
Yeah.
structure.
Because part of it is just too. Part of it is just too, is that modern, technology and the way people digest content now is so different than it was, even 10 years ago. So, things, if you even have a document like this, you would certainly have a printed out master plan, but if you have a digital form of it and it has hyperlinks in it, then you can kind of go through this stuff. And if you don't want to drill in, you just click on it and it takes you down to the other piece of it.
Yeah.
So,
And that's how the table of contents is all linked together. And then we do a table of all the charts and all the maps and figures too. That's at the beginning. So if you're reading through and you're only looking for certain information, click on it. It takes you to that part of the document as well. Once you get into the digital version for it. So hopefully making it a little bit easier. Outside, we even just define, Control F and PDF to find what you're looking for. So that's where you'll start to see, once we get it laid out, outside of Word. I mean, Word's a great basis for us to write in, but it's really difficult. Like even with the maps, it screws up the way things are laid out, but they'll all have full page map for all the maps that are in there too, to hopefully make it easier to see. And we'll adjust colors too, because once you start printing, you start to see some of the information. It's more difficult to read on how it's presented. So. Anything else in economic development?
I don't have anything specific. Anyone?
No, it's well laid out.
Okay.
Very nicely done.
I'm glad that you found it interesting. The in-plan is really fun when
Might
you
have
get
been a
into
little
it.
bit of a stretch.
Fine, it wasn't interesting, but to get into that data and you just spend hours and go, okay, how do we make this as succinct as possible with what you have? So looking at the transportation section, again, if anybody has any comments or anything different, this is kind of a snapshot of the community.
This one's pretty straightforward. I mean, we have some roads, we have some trails.
We'll update the Torchport.
I'm fascinated that they average 20 flights a day.
It's been a lot more.
Has it?
Oh, yeah. A lot more recently than it was in the past, yes. People are excited. Must be a smooth ride.
I do like that.
I think they're cool to look at, so whatever. There's only been one really big loud one so far, so.
I haven't noticed much difference, but I have been traveling so much myself that I haven't seen the big one yet. I've heard about it.
Oh, there's one. Okay, anything else in the transportation chapter anyone would like to? I also don't think we have as much influence here, right? There's not a lot
Right.
we can do with.
I mean,
We're not
the,
going to build a new highway, so.
right, and, I mean, that would be, if there is something that, we are missing, or we need to, like, if I didn't know about the trailway and totally
Yeah, right.
forgot that, but,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this really is kind of basic background information for you, on it.
And there would be information available from MDOT if there were any sort of serious changes, they wanted
Yeah.
to reroute 31 somewhere. or
Right, yeah, and we haven't heard anything.
Things that we would have to think ahead about in the next 5 years.
Or
so-
major expansions or anything like that.
Right.
I mean, they
Right.
should do we're low on their priority list.
Could use a couple turn lanes.
That's what I was, every time I drive 31, I think there is no passing flare here or center turn lane, and I don't know how it's not caused more issues.
Yes, could use a few of those.
Okay, well, I'll make those couple of edits. Looking forward, we have probably start talking about existing land use and future land use. These will be existing, we do based on the assessor's information, what they have it coded as. That's kind of our easiest way to get an idea if it's residential, if it's improved, it has a house on it, or if it's vacant. Kind of use that for our basis, and that helps us to see patterns of where construction and uses currently exist. And then future land use, we'll take a look at the existing future land use map, but then we also like to pull in, all this background information. So where your wetlands are, where, trees are, where slopes are, all that information as well, and pull it into a map that might help to make better decisions about where future development happens in the community, instead of just saying, here's a road and it's going to go on this side of the road and that side of the road. Well, why don't we look at what the natural features are of the community along with our current development pattern to generate a future land use map that we might actually like when it happens, instead of having an application come in and go, why did we allow that to happen there? It's a big wetland. Why would we want to have high density in that
Right.
area? That's kind of extreme for Torch Lake, but that happens way too often because you're not actually looking at the land that you have for that development.
It's right down here in Bay Colony.
Yeah. Mhm. So we'll start, what you'll probably see is some sort of a very rough draft of it, and then we can get some input too at the open house that will help to feed into that document. So my goal would be to have kind of this a first pass by the planning commission on future land use that then we could get some community input on at the open house to move forward with. So,
Good.
okay,
So I think that's looking forward to new business, right? Because we don't have any new business tonight.
right, yes.
Ongoing reports. Sarah, I think you may have just given your report.
I kind of did. I don't think I put in my zoning report in there. Let me,
I don't think we've seen that. this
you
one.
probably have not. I can give you a brief overview because it's very interesting. We're up to 31 permits for the year, which is compared to last year, at least double at this time. So been very busy with, phone calls related to permits and what you need, and then also getting people through the permitting process, because probably each permit, sometimes you have a simple deck permit and somebody comes in and they turn it all in and there's no phone calls or follow-ups, but most of the time you're dealing with, multiple times trying to get the information to get a permit from someone. So lots of phone calls related to that. Just a couple of land divisions for this year. And then I'm going to steal, Jeff, your thunder, your report a little
please.
bit, but we had our second ZBA case at the beginning of the month for a new dwelling over on Trillium Ridge, and it had basically 2 front yard setback variances and 2 side yard setback variances. So all of the property lines asking for a variance on it. The Zoning Board of Appeals did deny that application, or all 4 variances for it. There's they were asking to build, it was a 2,200 square foot home with a 3-car garage, and there's a building envelope that's at least 2,200 square feet there to be able to build in. And so the ZBA went through that process. They did submit another application for a different variance, so that'll be at the July meeting for the ZBA for that. And we also are dealing with a couple of complaints and violations outstanding that are kind of in the court process. One was an appeal, so Volkers, which is ongoing, was an appeal of the lower court's decision that's working its way through the court process, as they have a right to based on a ticket. And then the boroughs as well, they were going through an appeals process, and we are working through the court system on enforcement for that ongoing as well. So those are kind of the 2 that were outstanding. There is one that we went through a court process back in, this was reported in 21. I don't remember when we went to court on it, but they're just about compliant. They were supposed to have their CFO at the end of April, and they, put siding on 2 weeks ago, and they're getting really close on the house component there. So kind of, and we don't have any so far special use site plan review for planning commission. So we'll just keep working on the master plan.
Good. Keep us free for this. Okay. ZBA report, I think you just got it. We denied and haven't updated. Andy? I think that comes to you.
So we had a board meeting about a month ago, and kind of just general items that were addressed. The biggest topic at that meeting was there was a lot of commentary from the public on the library. It's still something that it seems to be quieting down a little bit, but there has not been a board vote on any kind of library thing. There was a new contract that was brought forward by the Elk Rapids Library, and it was never voted upon because it had a kind of fundamental issue with it, in that it only would apply to essentially about half of the Torch Lake Township residents, even though the contract would be funded by a fund that's out of the general fund, which is supposed to apply to all residents. So that's the fundamental issue with it. So we're waiting to see if a proposal comes back from the library, or if they put it on a ballot, and then it can be voted upon for people who live in the Torch Lake Township that live in Elk Rapids School District could then use that, just like, because that's the way it works for Central Lake School District residents. think a couple other items are going to come up tomorrow. Creswell Boat Ramp is going to be something that's discussed. It was brought forward by the fire chief that they're on the south end of Torch Lake Township. There's not a good, you've got these beautiful fire trucks, but there's not a very good place to go gather water that's that close because the existing Creswell Boat Ramp is all deteriorated. And we're going to look into seeing what it would cost to make it stable so the trucks could back up and grab water. So that's about it.
That takes us back again to public comment. If anyone has anything they would like to add based on the meeting, not seeing any hands. Concerns of the commission. Sorry, we'll go back to public comment. Could you come up to the microphone, please, so the audience can hear?
My name again is Casey Wiggins, actually still.
Thank you.
I'm still at 131 Northwest
Got it.
Torch Lake
Yes,
Drive.
thank you.
So my question is, on the agenda, my understanding is the public comment, item 6, is for agenda items other than a public hearing. We didn't have that. And the second public comment, 11, was for things other than what we talked about here today. Is that a misunderstanding? Is that correct?
It could be. I think we're revising our agenda format a bit, so don't get too wedded to that idea.
So at the board, the first one is for items other than what we're going to talk about tonight, and the second one is things that we have talked about tonight.
Yes.
And so I just wondered if you're going to be consistent with that.
We will try to be consistent.
And I'll try to be consistent too.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So just to be clear, so for the board meetings, the first set of public comments are for items related to the agenda, restricted to agenda items. And then then the second one is for citizen comments open to township subject matter. So it could be anything.
That's the township board's agenda.
Yes, the township.
And that's how I like to do it as well at the planning commission, so that people can comment on the agenda item before you talk about it instead of after.
Right.
But also keeps people that are here to talk about the weather, not
Yes.
take up your time before the agenda item.
We'll be more clear about that in the future so there
Yes.
isn't any question about it. Good.
Is there any mechanism for comment that we heard during the meeting? So.
You're
I made
welcome
my
to comment now.
You guys talk. No, I just wondered if, what, I don't have a comment. My question
Okay.
is to clarify that point. Is there a rebuttal time?
I mean, during this public comment portion, say you made public comment at the beginning of the agenda, right? And then they decided to take your advice or not take your advice, right? You could come back at public comment now and say, thank you for not listening to me, but here I have more to tell you about that same item again.
Well, in that case, then I'm going to say thank you for listening. And he said he made comment about that, but thank you.
Yes.
Okay, just for clarification.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Concerns of the commission. The chair is concerned that we make sure we get the public comment right in the future. Other than that, I don't have any. Anyone else? Sarah? No. All right. I think that takes us to adjournment because we have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned at exactly 8:20. Thank you all for coming.